question is what is God doing? When we think about the world today, it's a crazy place. Your spiritual life, your own life, your family life. Welcome to Legacy Family. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to the future dads. We are so excited about all that God is doing in establishing legacy in dads' lives. Today, we're going to continue our study on the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We've talked about it all. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And today what I want to look at is this little phrase that says, give us this day our daily bread. And it talks about the provision of God. And so today I want to title this message, this study, the Big Sky Bread Company. Because in the Gospels, Jesus and the people tell the story about Jesus feeding the 5,000. Many of you have read it before. And so there's several different accounts that you can look at it in, and there's several things that you can learn. In the account of Luke, these people had kind of pulled away with Jesus for him to rest, but the people had followed him, and it says in the book of Luke that Jesus welcomed them. When I want to talk about provision, and opportunities and seasons, I want you to understand that even though Jesus had gone away to rest, that he still welcomed the opportunity of challenge. Many of us in our life, we mistake seasons. We think that everything is going to be a mountaintop when sometimes we go through the valley. Just yesterday I spent time with a couple of conversations, and they both had so much in common. They're both godly people. They both have a heart after God. They're both going through major transitions. They're both going through seasons of really trusting God's provision. They're both trying to figure it out. And they're both doing it in two different ways. And one of them is welcoming the opportunity. In Isaiah 40:31, I talk about it often. It says, those who wait, that are interwoven with God, will renew their strength, will be catapulted forward at a non-natural force. And then they will soar on the wings of eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not grow faint. Now, those are the three seasons that we all walk through in life. And I'll tell you from my own experience, when you start the walking and not going through the fainting season, it's not that fun. It's not that great. But it's still an opportunity to be interwoven with God. And in these conversations I had yesterday with a couple of these different people, one was full of worship and one was full of worry. One was full of being positive and one was full of being pessimistic. One was filled with what was going on in his personal agenda in that moment, and one was filled with the kingdom agenda and what God was doing in the long play. And so when we look at provision, I want us to understand that provision comes in seasons. And in the Big Sky Bread Company, there's seasons that God is going to pour it on. And then in the Bible, there's seasons that says you need to store it up. And the thing that you don't want to say, in my opinion, to God is, I've got it made. I'm self-made because I did this. I'll never go through that. Because the moment we say that, God will allow the enemy to strip it away. Just to test you. Watch this next part. It says when the people came to him, his disciples, and said, oh, we've got these 5,000 people plus now. What are we going to do? Jesus said, I'm going to sit down and ask you a question about this great crowd. And so he looked at Philip and he said, where shall we buy bread for all these people? Now get this. Where shall we buy bread for all these people? He asked this only to test him. Now, I would never use the word trick spiritually, but really he was trying to trick him. He was trying to see if Philip was being interwoven and full of worship or if he was going to be full of worry. He was looking to see if he was looking at this opportunity to bring health, because it said that when this crowd came that Jesus started healing. So even in the midst of our droughts financially, in the midst of our droughts emotionally, in our midst of our droughts spiritually, God can bring health if we'll allow Him to. When we don't see that health in our spirit first, it will never take place in our mind and our heart and our soul and our body. But when we allow Him to bring that health and we believe in that promise, He'll establish that health in our lives in the long term, no matter what it looks like, to the glory of God. And so in that, He asked Philip, He was kind of trying to trick him. Now the spiritual word is He was testing him. But He was trying to trick him to see if he would answer, because it says right there, he already knew. He already had in mind what he was going to do. Now Philip answered, again, another point here. It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one of them to have one single bite. In my conversations yesterday, one person was overwhelmed with worship and one person was overwhelmed with worry. But Philip is saying, I'm overwhelmed with this opportunity. Many times God will allow us to walk through seasons where it doesn't look like we have provision, and not just financial, in all these different ways, to see if we will trust Him in the opportunity. If we will trust Him and not be overwhelmed with worry, but be overwhelmed with worship and be interwoven with God so that He can catapult us forward to see the greatness and the goodness of God. It's Father's Day. And we have a Father that loves us. We have a Father that knows all the details of our lives, every hair on our head getting less, and knows everything about us. But He will allow us to go through seasons of testing. And when He goes through those seasons of testing with us, He's allowing us to see if we're going to respond to the opportunity and allow Him to bring more health to set us up for the next season, for Him to catapult us forward, to renew us, or if we're going to prolong the season by bowing our knee to worry. We can bow our knee to worship. We can bow our knee to worry. We can bow our knee to saying, God, I surrender to You, or we can bow our knee to say, I surrender to the circumstances. I just don't know the outcome. Where when you believe in the Bible and you have a biblical worldview, your outcome never changes. You win. It might be your flesh dying and you going to heaven, but you win. And so when Jesus said it is finished, what was He meaning? He was saying that part of the plan was finished. And He had done everything that He needed to do to that point to establish victory in our lives. Now that's not a message that we're always going to have incredible cars and big houses and all these things. It's a simple message of as our soul prospers, everything else can prosper. That no matter what we walk through, we have the opportunity to see health and to surrender in worship or to surrender in worry. So the story goes on. He said, I want you to go and I want you to talk to Andrew and Simon Peter's brother. And so they spoke up and he said, there's this boy. And this boy, so then, now this is funny. He said, don't go to the merchant. Don't go to the guy who has it all under control. The guy who thinks he knows all the answers, which is the person who usually worries. He goes, go to the little boy. Go to the little boy, and he has 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among us? So again, even the closest to God are questioning God. So my encouragement to you is as you go through seasons, you're going to still question God. He's going to test us and He's going to allow us to walk through things, but that doesn't mean that it's bad for us to say, God, I really don't understand how you're going to use this little boy. I don't understand how you're going to take 5 small loaves and turn them into enough. And I don't understand how you're going to take 2 small fish and turn them into plentiful. And so in that, we have the opportunity to have a conversation with our God, which is what prayer is all about. It's what the Lord's Prayer is all about. Having a conversation with our God. Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place. So again, right there, the word plenty. There's plenty of grass. There's provision right there. There's plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. And there's about 5,000 men, plus all the children and women. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks. So always give thanks in every opportunity. Always give thanks in every situation. And he distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. Not a little bite, not a little cheap McDonald's communion cracker that a lot of us buy at churches now. He gave out plenty. And so God is a God of plenty. Now we'll walk through seasons where we don't have plenty, but God still does. And so all it is a matter of us welcoming Him in that opportunity, allowing health to come, and Him transferring His plenty into our lives from His treasure chest. Now in that process, when He did that, He said He had plenty, and He used this little boy. And when all was said and done, they had enough to eat. God didn't only give them enough to survive, God gave them enough to thrive. And so as you walk through seasons in life, it might look like you're never going to get to the end. You're never going to see the other side. But God, again, He's not tricky, not going to use the word trick, but He's testing to see if we trust in the opportunity for Him to establish health and for Him to use unusual ways, a little boy, small loaves, small fishes, to bring plenty in our lives. When we sit back and say, we don't have to worry financially because we put this much aside. Robin and I've done that. God stripped it all away. Because when we get self-reliant, God has no problem saying, I want you only relying on me. And so when we give Him glory, it releases the ability of God in our lives. But when we worry instead of worship, we become self-reliant and say, thank God I'll never have to go through that, when we're triggering God to say, enemy, you can take a run at that too. It's just like the life of Job that we've been talking about in devotionals. And so He fed the 5,000, and He had so much left over that they filled up these 12 baskets. And there were barleys left over, and some that were eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is a prophet who has come to the world. Here's what I want you to understand in that. When we trust in God for our daily bread, sometimes we don't know where it's coming from. It might come from the little boy. It might come from small fish. It might come from loaves of bread. But ultimately it's coming from the Big Sky Bread Company. And in that, He can do far more than we could ever imagine, guess, or request in our wildest dreams. And as He does that, it's about, will we bow our knee and will we surrender to worry, or will we surrender to worship? Will we welcome the opportunity and start looking around us and going, hey, we might not have bread, but we have plenty of grass. I mowed this morning. I got plenty of grass. And so in that, we look and we say, God, no matter where we are, we give thanks to You. We all go through transitions. Every organization, every life. Those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. And you'll go through 3 seasons. In each of those 3 seasons, God will provide for you His daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. So that's my prayer for you today. That's my prayer for us today. We want you to know how much we love you, how much we appreciate you, how proud we are of you. We want to thank you for sharing the message with others. We want to thank you for the way you're giving. When we talk about the daily bread, understand one thing, that God began to do the miracle when the disciples began their obedience. Obedience begins with the tithe. Tithe leads to generosity. Generosity leads to more, and you see the blessings of God. Thank you for those who tithe. Be obedient today, whatever house you're planted in, and trust in the miracles of God, because we serve a God that owns the Big Sky Bread Company. God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow for the devotional.